Welcome to Talkin Wellness with Beth and Jay, the podcast that makes living well, fun, and attainable. This podcast will empower you to make small changes in your life, resulting in big outcomes. This week, we're going to be talking about your mindset. We'll be discussing what you think and feel about yourself and how it impacts your life. And we may give you some tips of how to flip the script to make your life more successful. So sit back, relax, get ready to laugh with Jay and myself. Welcome, Talkin Wellness fans. We are so excited you've come to join us. So as you know, Jay and I, we have a passion for getting word out in the community. So we're going to be bringing you different wellness topics every week. And today we're going to start off with mindset. So good morning, Jay. How are you doing today?
I am doing great.
Good. It has been a busy, crazy world for me lately. I don't know about you, but I'm...
Yes, but that's the way I like it. We function best when there's chaos and
we do.
Deadlines and all kinds of craziness. So
we definitely function better. And I just recently read a book that shows there's different types of ways people function and how they think, and it's really, really interesting. So we'll talk about that later. But Let's get started with mindset.
All right. So mindset is something that we hear about all the time, right? Mm-hmm. This whole thought that there's this frame of mind or state of mind that either helps us achieve our goals or success or failures, or it's just something that it's innate within us, and then we either have it or we don't. So maybe the best place to start is to kind of define mindset.
And I think that's great. Yeah.
I'll refer to my notes. So basically, we can think of mindset as a set of beliefs that shape how we make sense of the world and ourselves. It influences how we think, feel, and behave in any given situations. And it basically means that what you believe about yourself impacts your success or failures.
Absolutely. So I got a little side note on this because that's what we do as side notes. I did on my mindfulness class last week, we talked about boundaries and we talked about our values. And mindset would fit right into that is, where does your mindset come from? And I tell people all the time when they tend to have more of a negative mindset or they tend to be very rigid about certain things, like where does that come from? I relate it to weeding your garden. I have everybody go through their gardens and say, oh, this is planted here. Why? Why is this planted? Was it spiritual influence? Was it religious influence? Was it family oriented? Was it hereditary? Like, well, this is what my grandmother did. This is what I did. Mm-hmm. Where is your mindset coming from? Because I feel like once you can realize where it comes from, then you get to make the choice. Is this something I want in my life? Or is this something I don't want in my life? And you get to weed your own garden. So once you can collect control back of your choices and you recognize where your mindset really comes from, I think it's a really powerful tool.
Yeah. And we're going to discuss that in a little more detail over the next few minutes here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think kind of speaking to what you said, Beth, is I think our beliefs that kind of come from our life experiences from the time we're really young and as we grow up play a big role in what we want and whether we actually achieve it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So I think when we think of mindsets, it can really influence in how we behave in all sorts of situations, mm-hmm. right? As we encounter different situations in life, sometimes our mind can trigger us to think back to a specific mindset, and that's kind of how we relate or handle that mm-hmm. specific situation. So I was doing a little bit of research on this, and there's actually a lot being done in this field, mindset, or on this topic, I should say. In one way to kind of look at this is to kind of maybe set the tone for the conversation is there's a couple different mindsets. There's either what we call fixed or growth. So when we look at like a fixed mindset, it basically implies that our abilities are fixed. They're innate. Yeah. They're fixed traits, and as such, they cannot be changed.
Very rigid.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Very rigid.
Yeah. So those with fixed mindsets may believe that innate talent and intelligence lead to success, and hard work and effort is not required. And there's certainly examples of that that I think we've all seen. Whereas more of a growth mindset is that your talents and abilities can be cultivated over time, through consistent effort and persistence. Maybe you'll never become Einstein or Mozart or any other famous individual, you name the field or whatever. Yeah. At least become a better version of ourselves.
We can always become a better version of ourselves. And I tell my son all the time, and I told my daughter this, but she's much older now, but he comes home, he's so frustrated with himself. And I tell him, your grades don't matter to me. They don't matter at all to me. What matters to me is the mindset you go into your classroom. Because we had a parent-teacher conference, and the teacher said that when Jackson doesn't think he can do something, he automatically shuts it down. And I'm sure we've all met that person where you try to open up a discussion with someone and they shut you down immediately. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to open their minds. And I think there's a key here that people that think when you open your minds to have a growth mindset, it means you have to agree with the other person's version of their story, but you don't. Mm-hmm. Growth means just being open up to learning lessons and cultivating maybe a new mindset, or adding to your pre-existing mindset, or opening up just a little boundary with something you already believe, but opening things up a little bit bigger to grasp, the fuller concept of your mindset. But back to my son, he would go into the room and he'd say, I can't do this. I don't want to do it. And they would try to teach him, and there was nothing. They couldn't get through the barrier. So we've been working on this all year this year. And what we found is if he knows that as long as he's trying his best and he's constantly yearning for something, he's always trying to improve himself in some way. I'm going to bring this home. I'm going to do this extra work. I'm going to, read this extra book. I'm going to do this extra credit. I'm going to go in for tutoring. As long as he's trying his best and has this open mindset, we're great. Whatever grade he brings home, he's doing his best. And some people are very rigid in that, well, no, you have to have this grade or you have to have this. So I think a lot of this mindset probably stimulates from early.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a distinction, a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed, is that willingness to consistently work at something, not just thinking, well, I can't do this because I don't have this talent. I wasn't born with this gift to be able to do this, so it's a waste of my time. I can't do it. Rather, I think what separates those that have more of a fixed mindset versus growth would be people that tend to lean more towards the growth side are willing to work. And and it's consistency too, right? It's not just about pushing for a little bit of time and then there's an end goal in sight. That's just kind of how you do things, constantly working, having the willingness to, even as things don't work out, to have that stick-to-it-ness.
Yes, I love that. I think Jay just created a new word, and I love it. I will stick-to-itness.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more with any of that. I really feel that successful people have that growth mindset. They show up every day willing to learn, willing to work their hardest, willing to be corrected when wrong and accept when wrong. And I know for me, everybody knows that I always struggle dietary. I'm great with exercise. I'm great with mindfulness. I'm great with meditation. It's my dietary that I really struggle with. So for me, when I'm talking to the dietitian, for me, it's, if I go in there with a closed mindset, no, this is the only way and I have went in there with a closed mindset. No, this is the schedule I have. This is that, I can't do anymore. I can't give you any more. And then I see people that are giving more. And I'm like, okay, Beth, who's number one right now? Is it, because if you keep eating in a negative way or the ways that are going to negatively impact your life, you're the only one that suffers in the end. So I feel like going into a place going, okay, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to learn what I can. I'm going to reach out and do what I can. And it's one step at a time. It's not trying, like Jay just said, it's not that end goal. It's that journey, that one step at a time journey towards being just a better you, a better version of yourself.
Yep. And that's ultimately what this is about here. And I think it's understanding that not only, yes, we can make more time, we can do these things. It's bite-sized chunks. It's just, okay, making wholesale changes is rarely going to work in anything. You mentioned nutrition and diet, which is a great example. We see that all the time, but it's taking it stepwise, one little step after the other, and just making tiny little changes. So
I found with mindfulness, just meditating alone made me want to sleep better because I wanted to self-care. And it made me want to eat better. And then it just snowballs. Wellness and healthy living is more about taking that one little step that snowballs into that next step, which snowballs into that next step. And next thing you know, it might be a year, might be 2 years, and it's an ongoing journey. There's always going to be something that we can do to correct.
It's life is a work in progress.
It's a practice.
The end is the end, and we want that to be as far away as possible.
We don't want to rush the end anytime soon.
Yeah. So, when we look at this fixed versus growth mindset, it could be, I have some statements here that, can kind of delineate what would be more of a fixed mindset versus a growth. So someone that's maybe more of a fixed mindset would say, either I'm good at it or I'm not. And we kind of spoke to that. It's like, it's either in me or it's not. If I don't have the gift, no amount of work is going to change that. Whereas someone with more of a growth mindset would say, I can learn to do anything I want. Another example would be, this is who I am, I can't change it. And as I was just talking about, more of a growth mindset would say, I'm constantly evolving, work in progress. Or, another example, if you have to work hard at something, you don't have the ability, versus the more you challenge yourself, the more you grow. And we see that all the time. It's one of those things where being willing to get outside your comfort zone, and understanding that that's truly where the growth is. If you don't make any changes, how can you possibly move forward?
You can't.
Or see anything different happen. So a lot of this kind of speaks to that. And we're going to talk a little bit about in our part 2 of this topic, how can we maybe change our mindset? We'll go over some basic things we can do there. So this kind of leads us to the second part, and you talked a little bit about it earlier, is how do mindsets form? There is actually, for those of you who like to read, there is a Stanford psychologist named Carol Dweck, D-W-E-C-K, and I have her book here someplace. It's called Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. So if you're interested in this topic, you could take a little deeper dive with Carol's book. But there are 2 primary sources according to her research, and one is praising and labeling, both of which occur in early childhood, and we're all familiar with these things.
Yeah.
So when it comes to praise, Dweck and her colleagues actually did what's ended up being quite a landmark series of experiments, where they found the kids behave very differently depending on the type of praise they received. So personal praise versus process praise. So personal praise would probably be something we're praising a child's talents or labeling them as smart. And that tends to promote more of a fixed mindset. It sends a message to a child that they either have an ability or they don't, which we just kind of talked about, and that there's nothing they can do to change that fact. Whereas if we're praising the process, as she terms it, it emphasizes the effort a person puts in to accomplish a task. It implies that their success is due to their effort and the strategies they use, both of which they can control and improve over time. So I think it kind of speaks to things that are beyond our control versus things that are within our control. And we speak a lot in the wellness space about this very thing. There's a lot of factors out there that we can't control. Correct. So to stress about it is kind of a waste of time. But what are those things that we can focus on? And that's our effort and our attitude and being consistent as we push towards whatever that goal is.
I can say naturally through the mindfulness and the science behind mindset, as far as the sympathetic versus parasympathetic nervous phase, is the more pressure we put on ourselves, the more we persist. So the more pressure that we put on ourselves to be perfect, quote unquote, and that's probably from the family of praise, thinking that we need to uphold this seat of perfection. And I definitely struggle with this. So this is definitely in my wheelhouse. The more pressure we put on ourselves to be perfect, the more we stimulate what's called our fight or flight, or our sympathetic nervous phase. And our sympathetic nervous phase, then in turn, we have poor digestion, we have poor immune system, our eyesight is more poor, our heart rates are higher, our blood pressure is higher, our breath rate is more shallow, stimulating more anxiety. We get more of an anxiety behavioral pattern. So even just the mindset of I need to be perfect actually stimulates a whole physiological process in the body that helps us on that downward spiral to high blood pressure, diabetes, poor immune system. I mean, I could go on and on and on, heart disease. So I find, our natural instinct in life is to think negative due to our survival instinct. But just being aware, like I said before, of being in the garden and being aware, why do I feel like I need to be perfect? Why do I feel like, this needs to happen this way? Like, where is this coming from? Because when you can take that power back of your own life and saying, you know what, I want to be perfect because X, Y, Z, but then in reality, you realize we're not perfect. We're imperfect human beings. And we can just kind of let that perfection go and take those labels off of ourselves. We're a much freer person and able to accomplish a lot more in life when we haven't labeled ourselves as whatever label we're carrying around.
Right. Absolutely. And we're actually going to talk about labeling coming up here in a second. And, some of those things you mentioned in terms of more of a physiological response, the fight or flight versus, the opposing the yin to the yang, so to speak. All those things are there for a purpose, and they can be positive things, but it's obviously, if you look at the way most of us live our lives and in the environments that we're living in, there's lots of stress. And if we're constantly feeding into that without that opposing, relaxation and downtime and detuning the system, so to speak, that's where things become a problem. So when we say, that sympathetic neural drive or response, for those of you that even care about those terms, it's not a bad thing unto itself. It's there for a reason. It's when we're constantly in those loops and we don't know how to shut it off, that's where the issue comes. And that's probably something we'll talk about.
I'm sure that's something we'll talk about.
So maybe a good example of process or the personal praise versus process praise would be something like, say if your child gets a good grade on a math test, personal praise might be, see, you are good at math. You got an A on your test. Process praise, on the other hand, might sound something like, I'm impressed by how hard you study for your math test. You read the material over several times, asked your teacher to help you figure out the tricky problems, and tested yourself on it. That really works. So they're pointing to the process that you took to get to that end result rather than, the end result itself. Oh, you got an A, so you must be smart. So that's, to me, a very key distinction between those two types of praise and the ramifications it could have, especially early in childhood, on developing a mindset down the line.
That's exactly what I was talking to my son about. That couldn't be more spot on. Is he was thinking we were expecting him to be perfect, to get A's, because A's meant he was a good kid. And I told him, I said, I'm really proud of you for working so hard to get your score. And I looked at him, I said, but I'm going to be really proud of you even if you didn't bring that score. Like, I'm proud of you as a person, but I'm proud of you for the work that you've done. And then I said, are you proud of yourself? Because, you're going to tutoring, you're getting extra help, you're coming home and your dad's helping you with your homework. You're putting in the effort, and now it's showing on your report card. And, how does that feel to work towards something, And
I think that's the distinction. It's more, it's pointing to the work and the effort that they put in as opposed to that end result. In this case, a good result, like an A.
Yeah.
And I think how we approach this can have a powerful impact as we move forward in life.
Just praising yourself just for showing up.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, I got to show up to take that first step, and here I am.
I think it comes down to, again, maybe the simplest way to say it is it's praising efforts rather than the results.
Yeah.
Obviously,
definitely.
It's great if you get an A or you were successful at whatever endeavor you're trying to achieve. successfully navigating all the pitfalls of good nutrition,
Yes.
which is a whole rabbit hole unto itself.
Which I'm sure we'll also be discussing.
I'm sure. So basically, if you focus on the process rather than the outcome, adults can help their kids understand that their efforts, hard work, and dedication can lead to change, learning, and growth both now and in the future. So, if you're thinking about some things that you can do, if you have young children, is, again, praising is great, but how you frame it, I think, is
all
the
it
key
is.
part.
Yeah, it's all it is. It's how you verbalize it.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about labeling, which basically involves assigning people characteristics, based on stereotypes or associations with different groups. And that how those labels can also lead to more of a fixed or growth mindset.
Yeah, 100%. Labels are a big thing we talk about in mindfulness, because the label that you carry for yourself will come out. I know a lot of people that don't feel like they can do things. We work a lot with Parkinson's and MS and post-stroke and neuro conditions, and excuse me, their mindset is, oh, well, I have this diagnosis, so I can't X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
The diagnosis is not who you are as a person.
Right.
So trying to get people to shed their labels so that they can have that growth mindset to say, maybe we just have to modify.
Right.
It doesn't mean you can never X, Y, Z. It means maybe we X, Y, Z with modifications, or we change the way we approach it, or, a diagnosis does not label you.
Right. Or in one of those circumstances, like a Parkinson's or other neurological disorders, we know currently, as science stands, that it's not going to get any better. We know what the end result's going to be, but we also know that there are things that we can do to slow that down.
Evidence-based things, yes.
Slow that down and in effect some positive changes.
Moving forward, yeah.
Exactly. So, so basically, lots of different examples, but if you hold a specific mindset, that, X group of people are good at this, and you're not in that group, that you're automatically bad at that can lead more towards that fixed mindset that we're talking about, which again really takes the control away from you. And to me, that's what this is all about. It's what are those controllable factors that we can tap into that will allow us to move forward and grow.
Absolutely, because
assuming that's something you're interested in.
Assuming, yeah, but if you're listening to our podcast, I feel like wellness is like a part of your, or maybe you just love to hear Jay and I talk. But
maybe you. I don't know.
Very first step in anything is getting the mindset right, because if we jump into something with the wrong mindset, it's only setting yourself up for failure.
So a little more research that has been done, just having students check boxes about sex and race was enough to invoke internalized stereotypes that affected test performance. So, when we think about that, that has, huge implications in terms of setting our mindsets. If we automatically think, because of sex, gender, cultural differences, that this is the way things are.
Yeah.
And we're not going to go too far down this rabbit hole, but if you just look at the world in general, I think that's kind of where we are. A lot of what we're seeing is due just to that type of thing. So, so as we kind of move forward, wrapping up this first part one on mindset, we can talk a little bit about the impact of mindset. We've talked a little bit, some specific examples, but essentially, I think our mindset is really helps or plays a huge role in how we cope with life's challenges.
100%.
And I think when we're early childhood and we have a growth mindset, they tend to have a hunger to learn and a desire to work hard and discover new things. And this also often translates into academic achievement or achievement, sports or whatever it is that they're doing. So again, to me, this is, this can be a game changer, at an early age in how we foster these types of mindsets.
Absolutely. I can tell you right now, and maybe Jay can talk about this in the gym setting, and I'm going to talk about it in the massage therapy setting, that I can tell you immediately if you're going to get better or not. And here's how. When you come into the office with me and we're sitting behind closed doors and we're discussing, and I ask you how you're feeling and what it is that you're looking for, and you say, I have XYZ diagnosis and it's not going to get any better, and I'm here only because the doctor made me, and I'm in pain all the time, and I don't want to be here, and
give me a pill.
Give me a pill. Absolutely. And, and I say, okay, well, let's start with XYZ, or let's start with this. And they're like, no, that's not going to work. I've tried that before. And I'll say, okay, well, why don't we try this? No, that's not going to work. I've tried that before. And I can instantly tell in that very first 20 minutes of talking to someone that I'm not going to be helpful, because that rigid mindset has blocked you from receiving anything that I could possibly offer you. Now, the people that come in and say, listen, I have XYZ diagnosis, I'm in a lot of pain, but as of right now, I'm willing to do anything that I can to make it better. And I'm here for you as a last case or last option scenario. I've been to doctors, I've been here, I've been there. What can we do? And then those are the people that heed my expert advice. I don't mean I'm an expert, but I'm a healthcare professional. So they make me an expert in my field, and especially doing it for 20 years now. So, when they heed my advice and they're consistent with the treatment plan, they're consistent with the exercises, they're consistent with the stretches, the heat, whatever it is that we do, and then they come back, they always get better. Mindset is the number one thing that will ensure you're going to get better. Now, are you going to be completely pain-free? Is everybody, walk out my door after one session and feel amazing? No, that's not the way it works. But just having that growth mindset allows us to work together as a team and makes your results so much better than any other person with the fixed mindset.
Yep. And again, it comes back to having, that thought of, oh, what can I control? Those are the things I'm going to focus on. And in your example, what can we control? I can put in the effort to do the exercises, to show up to these sessions, to do the things that you, as my healthcare provider, are giving me that are going to help me get to where I want to be. So I think that's a great example. We see it all the time, in a fitness setting, whether it's personal training, coaching a larger group, whatever it might be. It's, people are either ready to do it or not. And that speaks a little bit more to some other aspects of change behavior that we could probably address certainly in future podcasts. But I definitely think, this distinction between thinking, well, it is what it is, I am who I am, nothing can change that, versus, well, maybe I don't have, all the answers, maybe I don't have all the skills and talents required, but I can still work and make things better.
I'm willing to put in the effort.
That's what it's all about.
So let's do a quick little recap, because we're going to be focusing next session on your mindset, what your mindset is, and how we can work towards that growth mindset, how we can work towards, because it's really number one is that growth mentality, that growth mindset. That's the number one thing we have to fix before we can move forward with anything in health and wellness.
And we're going to talk about that in part 2 of this. Go through a little exercise and some questions that we can ask ourselves, and then maybe talk about what can we do to unfix the mindset.
Yeah, so I think this week, if you can just focus on changing the phrase, I call flip the script, is what we say in mindfulness class. Flip the script, instead of praising the person, praising the process. Yep. And stripping off those labels, and do a little gardening in your life. Do a little gardening. Find out where these labels are coming from. If they're labels you're willing to keep, if they're labels you want to change, if they're labels you want to strip altogether, so we can work next week on trying to change your mindset.
Yep. Just focus on those things that you can control.
Absolutely. So remember, if you are not uncomfortable, you are not growing. So it's really important to get that in your mindset right now, that change is uncomfortable. So if it is not challenging you, it is not changing you. So, all right, Jay, until we meet next week.
Sounds good. See you guys next time.
Thank you, guys.
colors. I think I just like.
I was looking at your gold shoes over there. You should put those. You can't see your feet. But it's just
Right here. Or I can just shift that down.
Oh, but I'm in black too, so it's perfect.
That's all right.
Okay.
As long as they can hear our voices.
And I think you can.
Yeah.
So